Matteo, the morning meal is prepared. Carolina exclaimed as she completed the arrangement of her uniform. The clock read 6:30 in the morning, and I found myself already behind schedule. I refuse to accompany Donna Lupita, Matteo declared from the confines of his room. Darling, you understand that I have to focus on my work, her phone buzzed. A note from Lupita. Carolina, I regret to inform you that I won't be able to look after Matteo. I fell ill quite severely last night. Absolutely not. Carolina sank into a chair. It was his second week in Grupo Valencia, and missing it was simply not an option. Look, I don't need to accompany Donna Lupita. Matteo, this is important. I need to think, he shouted to his mother, yet there was no response. His sister was employed in a different city. Her companions would be present in the office. I was left with no alternatives. You're going to accompany me to work, Matteo's eyes sparkled with excitement. Seriously? Indeed, but it's essential to conduct yourself with utmost propriety. Commit to it. I assure you, I assure you. As she traveled on the subway, Carolina went over the guidelines. Silence is essential. You will be positioned right beside my desk. I have your tablet and your colors with me. Will I have the opportunity to view the large offices? No, my dear, you must remain motionless. As Carolina stepped into the building, she sensed the weight of everyone's gaze upon her. Matteo, grasping her hand, observed everything with wide-eyed wonder. Mommy, check out how tall I am now. Hush now, recall the vow you made. At her desk, Carolina crafted a little nook for Matteo, complete with his Spider-Man backpack and an array of toys. Good morning, Carolina, greeted her partner Anna. And what about this tiny creature? My caregiver fell ill. Indeed, I was left with no other option. No need to stress, I've got your back if the boss shows up. The morning unfolded with an unexpected tranquility. Matteo created and engaged in quiet contemplation. Carolina exhaled, feeling a moment of ease, but soon it was time for lunch. Mom, I'm feeling hungry. So close, my dear. I'm wrapping up this report now. Carolina's fingers danced across the keyboard, her concentration unwavering as she aimed to complete her task. Upon turning around, Matteo had vanished. Matteo rose abruptly. Matteo observed as Anna made her way back from the cafeteria. What's going on? Matteo seems to be missing. A boy dashed toward the elevators. Carolina experienced a sudden flutter in her chest. The elevators ascended to the executive floor. No, please, not there, he dashed toward the stairs. As he approached, his mind was consumed with thoughts of job loss, of returning home that evening unable to cover the rent. And then he listened closely. Father. The call that would alter his existence eternally. Madam. Ruiz, are you aware of the fragility of this situation? Alejandro gazed at her from across the desk. Carolina was attempting to hold Matteo steady on her legs. Sir. Valencia, if you would permit me to clarify, my cousin Diego never indicated that he had tied the knot. We tied the knot in secrecy. Carolina pressed her lips together. His family. The Valencia family always disapproved of our relationship. Hey Dad, check out my drawing. Matteo extended a wrinkled piece of paper. Matteo, I've already mentioned that Mr. Valencia is not, just drop it. Alejandro interjected, seizing the drawing. Is this a hero, champion? Indeed, much like those who occupy a lofty structure. Alejandro offered a faint smile, yet his demeanor shifted as he turned his gaze toward Carolina. What stopped you from searching for the family after Diego passed away? I made an effort. I dispatched letters and emails. No one replied. Unfeasible. I would have, Mr. Valencia. His assistant peeked out. The board of directors awaits your presence. Withdraw it. But, sir, I instructed you to cancel it. His voice allowed for no dissent. Carolina attempted to rise. It's time for us to leave. No. I seek clarity on this matter. Alejandro relaxed his tie. What led you to this position? I came across the advertisement on the internet. The position was essential for me. I had no idea this was your company. Father? May I look out the window? Alejandro paused briefly. He nodded in response. Proceed, but exercise caution. As Mateo dashed to the window, Carolina murmured softly. I kindly ask that you refrain from encouraging him. Explaining his father's situation to him is quite challenging. Diego felt like family to me. He vanished 5 years ago. At this moment, clarity has dawned upon me. She found herself captivated by someone her family deemed beneath them. I never, is that so? What was the reason for not responding to my letters? The office was enveloped in a heavy silence. Mom, I can see it all from up here. Carolina rose from her slumber. It is time for us to depart. If you intend to let me go, please proceed without delay. Let her go. Negative. Alejandro glanced at Mateo before shifting his gaze to her. There's much to discuss. Tomorrow, Mr. Valencia and Alejandro will join me for lunch. The trio. I must arrange a meeting with my nephew. Carolina felt the urge to voice her dissent, yet the glimmer of hope in Mateo's gaze held her back. All right, see you then. Indeed, Mateo exclaimed. Dining with father. As they exited the office, Carolina sensed that the carefully structured life she had built was starting to unravel. The most frustrating part was my uncertainty about whether it was a positive or negative situation. In her cozy living room, Carolina retrieved the shoe box she had tucked away beneath her bed. After a whirlwind of a day, Mateo found himself lost in slumber. I can hardly fathom that this is unfolding, he whispered, lifting the lid of the box. The initial image captured Diego beaming, with the ocean stretching out behind him. Identical dark hair, a robust jawline, and those piercing eyes, reminiscent of Alejandro. The device buzzed in his pocket. A note. I seek to gain a deeper insight into Diego. Alexander. Carolina inhaled deeply and replied. I possess some photographs. I'm available to take them tomorrow. The reply came without delay. Thank you very much. He persisted in examining the photographs. Their clandestine ceremony at the civil registry. Diego lugging boxes on the day they settled into their new home together. The final photograph captured, just 1 day prior to the tragic event. Mother? Mateo emerged, his eyes still half closed as he rubbed them awake. Are you able to see images of Dad? Approach me, my dear. He placed him on his lap. It's time to discuss Mr. Valencia. What makes you refer to him as Sir? It's father. No, dear. He's similar to Dad, yet distinct in his own way. He is related to him as a cousin. What is a cousin? Similar to a sibling, yet. I have 2 fathers. Carolina shut her eyes. What's the best way to explain something to a 4-year-old? Your father gestured towards the photograph of Diego. It's in paradise, don't you recall? Mr. Valencia shares many similarities with him due to their familial bond. Yet, he is present, we can observe him. Indeed, we can observe it, however. Could it also be my dad? Carolina preserved the photographs. It's intricate, my dear. It's time to drift into slumber. Are we going to witness it tomorrow? Indeed, we are scheduled to have lunch with him tomorrow. May I share this with Dad? Carolina remained silent. How could he refuse when it was the one thing his son had desired for as long as he could remember? Once he had tucked Mateo in for the night, he made his way back to the living room. He picked up his phone and composed yet another message. Could we arrange to meet prior to lunch? I would like to discuss what Matteo refers to it as. The reply required a few minutes to arrive. 8 in the morning, my workspace. Carolina gazed at the final photograph of Diego. What is my role? What actions would you take? Silence was the only response he received. Onward. Alejandro's voice resonated with authority from beyond the door. Carolina stepped into the office, cradling the box of photos in her arms. Greetings, Mr. Valencia. Please remember to call me Alejandro. He gestured towards the chair position before his desk. Did you have them with you? Carolina acknowledged with a nod and took her seat. Before we present this, it's essential to establish clear boundaries. Limits. Concerning Matteo and the way he addresses you. Alejandro reclined in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. I understand you. I can't allow him to form a bond with you, and then, what happens next? And then he vanished, just as all the Valencias did when Diego passed away. Alejandro rose suddenly. I was completely unaware. Do you comprehend? Silence. How can this be? It was his relative. Diego has departed. One moment he was present, and the next he swept his fingers through his hair. I was under the impression that he had no interest in learning about the family. Carolina carefully opened the box and retrieved an envelope from within. Here are the letters I dispatched. All of them were returned. Alejandro grabbed them, skimming through the pages swiftly. His complexion drained of color. This location was once my mother's workplace. What is that? She navigated family dynamics. All events unfolded because of her. Carolina experienced a sudden chill. It indicates that I should reach out to some contacts. Alejandro picked up his phone. Hold on a moment. As he spoke softly by the window, Carolina laid the photos out on the desk. Diego is beaming. Diego at the shore. Diego felt an overwhelming joy, he whispered softly. Alejandro came back, his expression strained. My mother came across your message. He claims his actions were motivated by a desire to safeguard the family legacy. Safeguard? About me? A waitress who became the wife of a Valencia. Carolina rose, gathering the photographs. An error occurred. Hold on a moment. Alejandro halted her. I am different from her. Diego was my closest companion. So, what is it that you desire at this moment? Could I take on the role of Matteo's surrogate father? I wish to see my nephew. I would like to learn about the recent years of my cousin's life. I aspire to make the correct choice. They exchanged glances, the air thick with unspoken words. Carolina finally announced that lunch is still on. However, I require your assurance that you will not cause harm to Matteo. You've got it. Alejandro gazed at the photographs. May I take a look at them? Carolina nodded, and they settled in to reflect on Diego Valencia's final joyful moments. Carolina, I would like you to come to my office. Alejandro's voice resonated with a formal tone through the intercom. It had been a fortnight since the event occurred. Sharing lunches with Matteo had settled into a serene rhythm. Upon entering, Mr. Valencia was greeted. Grupo Lopez seeks to extend its agreement. This client holds the utmost significance for us. I understand, sir. Please take charge of the project. Carolina's eyes widened in astonishment. However, I have only been here for a month. You possess the highest level of expertise. I have gone over your past experience. Do you believe you're helping me out for Matteo's sake? Alexander beamed. Absolutely not. This will indeed require some late hours. Your time with your child will be reduced. Carolina nibbled on her lip. What is the duration? 60 days. The agreement ought to be finalized by that time. I need to locate someone to look after Matteo. My assistant can suggest someone to you. I have no requirement for Carolina. Alejandro cut in, breaking her train of thought. It's not a kindness. It's a task. She gave a slight nod. When shall we begin? This evening. Request some Chinese cuisine. The night stretches ahead, long and endless. At 9 p.m., amidst a sea of papers and takeout containers, Carolina observed a change in Alejandro. Do you resemble him so closely when you focus? He whispered softly. Alejandro raised his gaze. Excuse me? Diego. He repeated the same motion with his lips. Did you happen to stay late as well? Negative. Carolina beamed with joy. He loathed the idea of lingering beyond the usual hours. He remarked that life was fleeting. He consistently stood out as the nonconformist in the family. Could that be the reason for their closeness? We stood apart from the others. He took the bold step to depart. Alejandro abandoned the sentence, leaving it hanging in the air. Excuse me, what did you say? I remained. I adhered to the course they anticipated for me. The stillness that ensued was laden with words left unsaid. Carolina proposed that we return to our tasks. Indeed. Alejandro went back to the documents. The task at hand. Yet, an undeniable shift lingered in the air. A fresh, unique strain of tension. A tension that neither of them was prepared to acknowledge. Uncle or ale? Matteo's voice resonated through the corridor. She had stopped referring to him as Dad, yet her enthusiasm remained as vibrant as ever. Victor. Alejandro lifted him effortlessly into his embrace. What brings you here at this hour? An unexpected situation arose for the babysitter. Carolina detailed her thoughts, all while managing the weight of Matteo's backpack. I apologize. I'm aware that we are currently deep into the project. Absurdity. My workspace can comfortably accommodate 3 individuals. Matteo dashed to the window, his cherished spot. Observe, dear mother, the brilliance of the lights. Kindly refrain from touching the glass, dear. Alejandro observed the unfolding scene, a smile gracing his lips. He bears a striking resemblance to Diego at that age. Were you his caregiver as well? In a practical sense. My uncles embarked on numerous journeys. Carolina carefully extracted the documents from her folder. Should we proceed with Uncle Ale? Matteo cut in. Could you share a tale from when my father was a child? Alejandro glanced at Carolina, his eyes seeking her consent without a word. She gave a slight nod. Come here, he gestured toward the sofa with a gentle pat. Let me share the story of when your dad and I escaped to the amusement park. Absolutely. As Alejandro wove his tale, Carolina observed the sparkle in his eyes, the way his hands moved animatedly like Diego's, and the adoring gaze Matteo directed at him. And then your father remarked, Mr. Valencia, his assistant interjected. The board of directors is seeking an update on the project's progress. Alexander's expression grew steely. Inform them that the report will be ready by tomorrow. However, tomorrow, Lucia, the secretary, emerged, but not without first glancing curiously at the unfolding scene. The whispers will begin shortly, Carolina murmured. Do you have concerns? My role, your role is secure. Alejandro focused his gaze on Matteo. Where could it have been? Indeed, Diego. Carolina observed her son chuckling at the tales. He observed as Alejandro evolved into the young man he once was. For the first time in ages, he sensed that perhaps, just perhaps, everything might be all right. However, have you heard the whispers? They were merely beginning their journey. Alejandro, we need to have a conversation. Carmen Valencia stepped into the office unannounced. Mom, I'm currently in a meeting. Carmen cast a scornful glance at Carolina. I understand the nature of the meeting. Carolina started to collect her papers. I shall return at a later time. No, Alejandro intervened. Remain. Mother, allow me to introduce Carolina Ruiz, your new assistant. Indeed, I have come across some whispers. Diego's bereaved spouse. Carmen's complexion drained of color. Could you repeat that? The correspondence, mother, the ones you intercepted. I'm not quite sure I understand your point. Alejandro retrieved the letters from the confines of his desk drawer. These letters, meant for me, that I never got to see. It was a house of fortune. Carmen unleashed the words with a fierce intensity. Diego found himself in a state of bewilderment. I worked as a server at my beloved eatery. Alejandro's voice quivered. Do you recall? I presented it to you. Carolina shifted her gaze between them, a moment of clarity dawning upon her. Did you happen to introduce us? Dining at the Italian eatery. Diego was always there to take my order whenever I visited. There was a day when you were present. You inquired whether I could suggest a wine. Carmen struck the desk with force. Enough, I refuse to permit this. Be mindful of your words, mother. You're referring to the mother of my nephew. Mateo, my dear nephew. At 4 years old, he bears a striking resemblance to Diego. Carmen sank into a chair. Diego had a son you were unaware of due to your own pride. Alejandro, Carolina interjected. No necessity exists. Indeed, it is, mother. You will come to understand your grandson, and you will show both him and his mother the respect they rightfully deserve. What else is there? Or will you face the heartache of losing another child? The ensuing silence was overwhelming. I want to see it, Carmen finally declared. Should we also dismiss it? Carolina inquired. To understand the sole remnant I possess of my son. Alejandro gazed at Carolina. The choice is yours to make. Carolina reflected on Mateo, her longing for family, and the presence of Diego. Join us for lunch at home this Sunday. In an office thick with tension and hidden truths, the convergence of two worlds that were never meant to be apart commenced. Diego was the one who first introduced you to Alejandro. Ana poured steaming coffee in the cozy confines of the office's small kitchen. It seems that Carolina was absent-mindedly swirling her cup. After all this time, what comes next? What's next, huh? Carolina, I've noticed the way he gazes at you. Refrain from beginning. What is your perspective on it? Carolina slammed the cup onto the table. He was a relative of my husband. It was, in the past. He is my superior. A leader who prioritizes time with you and Mateo over boardroom discussions. Regarding the project. The project concluded a week ago. Carolina chose to hold her tongue. It was indeed true. The project had concluded, yet the late dinners persisted. The narratives for Mateo. Echoes of joy. I am unable to, Ana. Why not indeed? As Carolina inhaled deeply, she realized that each time she gazed at him, Diego came to mind. No, you perceive only what aligns with your desires, thus avoiding the acknowledgement of your true feelings. Greetings of the day. Alejandro's voice caught her off guard. Carolina, do you have a minute to chat? Ana flashed a smile and departed, but not without giving Carolina a playful wink. Is there anything you require, Mr. Valencia? Alejandro, he amended. I wanted to check if you and Mateo would be interested in going to the amusement park this Saturday. Is it the park? Where did you and Diego used to go? I believed Mateo would enjoy it. It is not possible. What's stopping us? He wanted to express that what he felt frightened him. As each day passes, it becomes increasingly difficult to view yourself solely as Diego's cousin. Because it isn't suitable. What is considered inappropriate? This. Everything here. Alexander made his way forward. Uncomfortably near. What is going on here, Carolina? His name whispered from her lips carried a unique resonance. Perilous. Mr. Valencia, that won't do. Do not conceal yourself using my surname. He advanced another step. What gives you fear? Nothing intimidates me. What's causing you to tremble? It was indeed true. I felt a tremor coursing through me. It was reminiscent of the moment when Diego had gazed at her with such intensity. I have tasks to attend to, he murmured, slipping away from the kitchen. Yet, he was unable to evade the emotions that consumed him. And that was what filled her with the deepest dread. Alexander, my dear. A harmonious voice broke the silence of the meeting. Did you not feel my absence? Carolina lifted her gaze from the papers before her. A sophisticated lady in a couture gown poised gracefully at the entrance. Isabella. Alejandro's body stiffened noticeably. I wasn't aware you had returned. Unexpected. Isabella strode in with the confidence of someone who owned the place. Could you please introduce me to your secretary? Carolina Ruiz, director of the Lopez project, Alejandro amended. Indeed. I've come across some information about you. Isabella grinned wickedly. Diego's spouse. Carolina rose from her slumber. May I have your permission? No. Alejandro intervened. Isabella, what is it that you desire? It isn't immediately clear. I returned for you. The organization requires a solid foundation. The organization is thriving exceptionally well. Is that your perspective? The council holds a different perspective. Carolina made another attempt to depart. However, Isabella obstructed the entrance. Remain, my dear. This piques your curiosity. Guess what? Alejandro and I are engaged. Alejandro interrupted, saying, we were. 2 years prior. A brief pause. However, at that moment, Carolina interjected. This is a matter of personal significance, and I appreciate your understanding. Ah, but you are included in this. Isabella made her way over. The bereaved and the abandoned. Incredibly handy. Isabella. That's sufficient. Alejandro's voice was frigid. Is that sufficient? I'm in the early stages of my journey. Do you really believe I'm unaware of your intentions? He gazed at Carolina. Did he mention that I hold 15% of the shares? Carolina's complexion drained of color. I have no interest in the company. Absolutely not. Your focus is solely on the owner. That's sufficient. Alejandro struck the desk with force. Carolina, please wait for me outside. This time, Carolina remained silent. He departed swiftly, yet still caught the sound. If you believe I'll allow another opportunist to destroy this family, Carolina dashed to the bathroom, tears on the verge of spilling. His phone buzzed softly. A note from Alejandro. I apologize. Don't allow it to affect you. You and Mateo are my loved ones now. Yet, the resonance of Isabella's words lingered in his mind. What if he truly had a point? What if it was all just a bit too perfect? The reflection stared back in terror. The very expression she wore when she first fell for Diego. And now the past has come around once more. In the company of the unsuitable individual. Inopportunely. Or perhaps not. Alejandro is required to provide a response to the council. The chairman of the board struck the table with force. Isabella Valencia holds 15% of the shares and presents a well-defined proposal. Carolina, nestled in the corner with her notes, maintained a steady gaze on her tablet. Alejandro replied, my personal life is not up for discussion. It is when the rumors start to impact the company. What whispers are circulating? Alexander rose to his feet. Concerning your connection with a particular team member. Every gaze was fixed on Carolina. Mrs. Ruiz is the widow of my cousin. Exactly. A different director stepped in. The similarity is remarkable. Could they be suggesting something? Isabella provides a sense of security. A collaboration with Grupo Valencia Montoya. Carolina started to quietly stow her belongings. I refuse to enter into a marriage based on convenience. Therefore, please proceed to sell us your shares. The room was enveloped in a profound silence. Excuse me. It's straightforward. Either you wed Isabella or you sell. The council has cast its vote. As Carolina approached the door, Alejandro's voice halted her in her tracks. Carolina, please remain here. Mr. Valencia, I believe. Remain. He made his way back to the council. There exists a third alternative. Which one? I purchased their stocks. Everything. The directors chuckled heartily. You lack the necessary funds. I have 1 week to accomplish this task. Alexander. The president offered a patronizing smile. Don't jeopardize your future on a fleeting impulse. The story of my existence. The choice I have made. He gazed at Carolina. She is not a fleeting fancy. Carolina experienced a moment where time seemed to freeze. 1 week, the president issued a sentence. At that point, we make our choice. As the crowd dispersed, Carolina remained behind. What prompted you to take that action? I'm weary of others dictating the course of my existence. Everything could slip away from you. Alejandro stepped closer, gently grasping her hand. Or I might achieve complete victory. Carolina delicately withdrew her hand. I refuse to be the cause of your failure. Carolina, that's not the way. This time, I will face it head-on. This time, I am definitely going. And he departed, leaving Alejandro to grapple with his choice. A choice that might jeopardize all that his family had established. Where is Uncle Ale? Mateo inquired at the dinner table. He has a lot on his plate, my dear. Has he stopped loving us? Carolina let her fork slip from her grasp. 1 week had elapsed since the gathering of the council. Without a doubt, he holds affection for us. Just the doorbell rang. Carolina glanced at the clock. 9:30 p.m. Refrain from opening it, Mateo advised. It resembles those chilling scenes from horror films. Carolina beamed as she peered through the peephole. His smile disappeared. Alejandro, we must have a conversation. The hour is late. Kindly. She swung the door open. Uncle Ale. Mateo dashed in his direction. Victor. Alejandro lifted him into his embrace. Looking after your mother? Absolutely. What kept you from coming? In my folly, he cast his gaze upon Carolina. A cowardly fool. Mateo, it's time for bed. But Mom, right now. As Mateo departed, the silence settled in with a weighty presence. Alejandro acknowledged it with a simple, I got it. What is that? The funds. I acquired every single share. How? I've parted with it all. The place I call home, the vehicles I drive, the investments I hold in various enterprises. Alejandro, I haven't finished yet. He made his way closer. I parted with all my possessions because a realization dawned on me. I have no interest in listening to that. You will definitely hear it. I realized that Diego did not abandon the family. He ran towards love. Carolina took a step back. Negative. Absolutely. I acted out of fear. I consistently opted for the secure and the correct. 4. Negative. I no longer feel fear, Carolina. I certainly do. Emotions surged forth, cascading like a gentle rain. Fear grips me tightly. What are we discussing? There comes a moment when you awaken to the truth that I exist merely as a recollection of your cousin. Alejandro cradled her face gently in his hands. You are the path I wish to follow. Uncle Ale. Mateo's voice cut through the conversation. You will remain here. Carolina glanced at her son before shifting her gaze to Alejandro. That one, he murmured. That's an excellent question. I am stepping down. Carolina placed the letter on Alejandro's desk. What is that? It's simply unparalleled. Your resignation will not be accepted. It's not a suggestion. Alejandro rose from his seat and strolled around the desk. What motivates you to engage in this activity? Last night, a revelation struck me. Carolina took a step back. An error has occurred. An error? Mateo's inquiry about your willingness to stay hit like a jolt of truth. Carolina. Wait, hear me out. My son has already experienced the loss of a father. I cannot afford to take that chance. I am not Diego. That's the issue, Carolina exclaimed. You are not that person. The ensuing quiet was overwhelming. I comprehend. Alexander turned and departed. I pondered. It holds no significance. I apologize. No, I regret to inform you. For holding on to the hope that it could transcend the recollection of my cousin. Carolina grabbed her bag. The correspondence awaits you on your desk. Carolina. Alejandro's voice brought her to a halt. Mateo will be informed by you. What item? That his Uncle Ale had also left him behind. The word struck with the force of a sharp blow. That seems unjust. No, you are the one who flees. I'm not escaping. Not at all. Alexander made his way forward. Then gaze into my eyes and say you feel nothing. Carolina raised her gaze. Error. His eyes, strikingly distinct from Diego's, bore into her. Unable to. What is it that you can't do? Your presence stirs a whirlwind of emotions within me. Alejandro advanced another step. Does that frighten you? It fills me with dread. Same here. In that pivotal moment, right in the heart of the office where everything began, Alejandro leaned in and kissed her. It was nothing like the experience with Diego. It was unique, fresh, intimidating, and undeniably perfect. As they parted ways, Carolina softly asked, "What comes next for us?" Now, Alejandro smiled, "We shred your resignation letter, Alejandro, and begin anew, free from shadows, free from fears." What about Matthew? Progress unfolds gradually. Carolina nodded, seized the letter, and ripped it to shreds. At times, a breaking point signifies not a conclusion, but a new beginning. It's a beginning. Have you caught wind of the latest headlines? Anna burst into Carolina's office. What's the latest? Isabella convened a press conference. He is alleging that Alejandro committed fraud. Carolina powered up her computer. The headlines validated it. Eris Valencia Montoya exposes discrepancies within Grupo Valencia. The sound of his phone pierced the silence. Alejandro, have you seen it? I have just discovered. Please take a moment to review something for me. The documentation for the Lopez project. Why? Isabella claims we have falsified signatures. Carolina experienced a sensation of breathlessness. However, that is simply not feasible. I oversaw all aspects. I understand. That's why I require your assistance too. The door swung wide open. Two gentlemen in tailored attire. Is Mrs. Carolina Ruiz present? Indeed. Office of the Prosecutor for Anti-Corruption. Your presence is essential for us to move forward together. Just a moment. Carolina picked up the phone again. Is that Alexander? I understand. I'm on my way there now. Refrain from making any statements without legal counsel present. In the dimly lit interrogation room, Carolina sat in silence, her thoughts swirling as she awaited the inevitable confrontation. After 2 hours had passed, Alejandro made his entrance accompanied by a lawyer. Are you all right? Isabella possesses various versions of the contracts. Fake. What gives you that insight? I possess the originals. Additionally, there is another point to consider. Alexander beamed. I possess emails. In the space between Isabella and my mother. Your mother. Every detail was meticulously arranged. Starting from the very beginning. Why? They prefer to witness my downfall than to acknowledge that I have forged my own way. The attorney interjected. Mrs. Ruiz, we possess evidence that confirms your innocence. However, your testimony against Carmen Valencia is required. Carolina gently shut her eyes. Mateo's grandmother. Is there truly no alternative? Is it her or is it us? Alexander remarked. Your mother made her decision. Now it's my moment to select my own. Carolina grasped her hand. Then I shall provide my testimony. At times, allegiance is found not in those connected by blood, but in those who remain steadfast when the world crumbles around you. Mrs. Ruiz, Lucia, who served as Alejandro's secretary, intercepted her in the hallway. I discovered this while organizing some old files. The envelope, tinged with yellow, bore the stamp of Diego's law firm. When did you discover it? This morning, amidst boxes destined for destruction. With hands quivering in anticipation, Carolina carefully opened the envelope. Diego's verses. Dear Alejandro, should you find yourself reading this, it means that something has occurred to me. I've always struggled with farewells. Carolina is expecting a baby. We are expecting a little one. I haven't shared this with anyone, not even my mother. You're the sole person I have faith in. If anything were to happen to me, please look after them. Not out of duty, but because I believe you will cherish her just as I do. I always noticed the way you gazed at her in the restaurant, just as I do. I hold no resentment towards you. One simply cannot help but adore her. I select you, dear cousin, for I am confident that you will act with integrity. Your strength has always surpassed mine. Carolina is everything to me. My son will carry forward my legacy. Yet you, Alejandro, embody my hope. Don't allow her to drive them away. Do not allow the surname Valencia to signify anything beyond affection. Look after them with care. Adore them. I hope you can overlook my request. Diego. Carolina let the letter slip from her grasp. His vision blurred with tears. Carolina. Alejandro emerged in the hallway. What's going on? Silently, he offered her the letter. She observed him as he immersed himself in the pages. She noticed the color drain from his face. She witnessed his tears. Alejandro murmured, I knew it. What is that? That he would grant me his approval. How could he possibly know? For he understood me more deeply than I understood my own essence. They exchanged glances. The correspondence served as a connection linking the past to the present. What are our next steps? Carolina inquired. What he requested was the appropriate course of action. In that instant, Diego's ghost ceased to linger as a mere shadow between them. It turned into a gift. The meeting room of the Valencia group was bustling with activity. The board of directors, lawyers, and at the heart of it all, Isabella and Carmen Valencia, poised like regal figures upon their throne. The president of the council declared, "Let us commence." Mrs. Isabella Valencia Montoya is now speaking. Isabella rose with deliberate grace. Esteemed members of the council, the evidence stands unequivocally before us. Alejandro Valencia and his associate have been manipulating documents to seize complete control of the company. Carolina, seated beside Alejandro, clutched the documents tightly in her hands. Diego's letter felt like a burden in her bag, a constant reminder of all that hung in the balance. Is there definitive proof available? Alejandro's attorney inquired. Absolutely. Isabella beamed with joy. Carmen, my dear, unveil it for them. Carmen Valencia retrieved a folder. Here are the original contracts for the Lopez project. The signatures, as you can observe, vary from one another. Fascinating. Alejandro rose with a sense of composure. Can you clarify the process you used to acquire those documents? That doesn't matter. Isabella interrupted. Quite the opposite. Alexander beamed. This is quite significant, particularly in light of these emails. The display behind him illuminated. Emails exchanged between Isabella and Carmen were displayed prominently. Carmen, the documents will be prepared by tomorrow. Isabella, please ensure the signatures match precisely what I demonstrated to you. Carmen's face went pale. This is a setup, Isabella protested. Is it? Alexander pressed on. How about this other one? The strategy is flawless. Once Alejandro stumbles, the company will belong to us. Carolina observed Carmen. The woman who had once shattered her family now observed her empire fall apart. Mom. Alejandro spoke to Carmen. Why? Why? Carmen rose, seething with anger. Because you are dismantling the heritage of this family. Initially, it was Diego and that waitress. What about you? Will you be captivated by her as well? I didn't develop feelings for anyone. Alejandro's voice was frigid. I rose from my slumber. At last, I made a choice of my own. Your choice was not the right one. Absolutely not. Carolina stepped in by retrieving the letter. Diego had a different perspective. What is that? Carmen made a swift attempt to seize the letter from him. The final testament of your son. Carolina evaded it. The child you distanced yourself from. The son whose final request you overlooked. The attorney picked up the letter and started to read it out loud. With every word, Carmen's complexion faded further. Upon his completion, an overwhelming silence enveloped the room. Diego. Carmen sank into her chair. My Diego. Your Diego. Alejandro made his way to his mother. I envisioned us all as a close-knit family. And you selected pride. Esteemed members of the council. The attorney stepped in. Evidence has emerged indicating the presence of document falsification, conspiracy, and fraud. However, not in opposition to my client. Isabella rose suddenly. This situation is utterly absurd. They are in disbelief. The lawyer went on to say that we also possess testimonies from 3 employees of the firm regarding how Miss Valencia Montoya coerced them into falsifying documents. The leader of the council carefully positioned his glasses on his nose. I believe we've observed sufficient evidence. Are we casting our votes? Hands lifted gradually, one after another. The president announced with unanimous agreement. The board stands firmly behind Alejandro Valencia as CEO and dismisses all allegations made against him. Isabella stormed out in a fit of rage. Carmen stayed in her seat. Diego held the letter in his shaking hands. Son, he murmured. It's quite late, mother. Alejandro grasped Carolina's hand. Yet, that was not the case for Mateo. My beloved grandson. Your grandson. If you are open to embracing a familial bond. Truly. Carmen cast her gaze upon Carolina. May I have your permission? Carolina pondered over Mateo. In his quest for belonging. Within Diego's desire. He replied, taking it one step at a time. Written by Mateo. As they exited the room, Alejandro paused her. Do you really think so? Diego envisioned us as a family. Carolina beamed. Everything. For the first time, Alejandro expressed his love. Not in the way Diego loved you. My approach. And I adore you, Carolina replied. Unlike the recollection of Diego. Yet, as the individual you decided to become. For love is not always a substitute. It is creating something innovative on solid ground. Carolina's apartment was filled with the inviting aroma of pasta and the warmth of freshly baked bread. The inaugural family dinner had finally arrived. And the tension hung in the atmosphere. Do you believe Grandma enjoys it? Mateo donned his new shirt once more, examining it with a discerning eye. He will adore you. Carolina straightened her collar. You resemble your father closely. Should I call him Dad Diego or Dad Ale? Carolina stood still. It marked the inaugural occasion when Mateo referred to Alejandro in that manner. Ever since that initial moment in the office. Matthew, can we discuss that? The chime of the doorbell broke the silence. Alejandro was the first to enter. Carmen trailed behind, her anxiety palpable. Father Ale. Mateo dashed in his direction. Carmen stifled a sob. The young lad bore an uncanny resemblance to Diego when he was that age. Matthew. Alejandro lowered himself into a crouch. Allow me to present to you an individual of great significance. This is your beloved grandmother, Carmen. Mateo regarded her with intrigue. Who is the mother of Dad Diego? Absolutely, my dear. Carmen lowered herself to the ground. Emotion spilling over. May I offer you a hug? Mateo gazed at his mother, who offered a soft nod. The embrace felt a bit clumsy initially. Yet, as Carmen whispered, my grandson, a shift occurred in the very air around us. As they sat down for dinner, Carmen found her gaze irresistibly drawn to Mateo. Each movement, each grin, brought back memories of his departed child. He has her eyes, he whispered to Carolina as the men busied themselves with the dishes. And his heart, Carolina replied, forgives all, just like him. Will there come a time when you can find it in your heart to forgive me? Carolina glanced toward the kitchen, where Alejandro was demonstrating to Mateo the proper technique for drying the dishes. I have already completed it, for them, for Diego. He would feel a sense of pride. Carmen grasped her hand. Among all of us. Mother. Mateo sprinted in their direction. Is it okay if I share my dad's album with Grandma? The collection of musical works. The images that Carolina had preserved throughout the years. Absolutely, my dear. As Mateo shared the photos, recounting the tales Carolina had shared countless times, a sense of healing enveloped the room. Look, there's Dad on the beach, Mateo said. Father informs him that we can visit that place for our holiday. Will you join us, dear grandmother? Carmen gazed at Alejandro, who responded with a nod. I would be delighted to, my dear. Once Mateo had drifted off to sleep and Carmen had left, Carolina discovered Alejandro on the balcony. What are your thoughts on the matter? A 4-year-old's grasp of forgiveness surpasses our own understanding. Young ones perceive through the essence of their emotions. What about you? Alejandro gazed at her. What do you perceive at this moment? Filled with optimism. Carolina nestled into his embrace. Embracing fresh affection. Are you bothered by Mateo calling me? He cut him off. Diego would feel a sense of joy. He expressed it in his letter. He selected you. He selected each one of us. Alejandro pressed his lips gently to her forehead. To belong to one another. And thus, beneath the celestial canopy, a fractured family embarked on the journey of mending. Remembering the past with reverence. Not by filling the void of lost love, but by creating space for something new to blossom. One heart at a time. The garden of the Valencia mansion sparkled with an enchanting array of lights and vibrant flowers. Mateo celebrated his 5th birthday. For the very first time, the entire family gathered in one place. "Do you really believe this is the right choice?" Alejandro inquired, observing Carolina as she meticulously arranged the final touches. She smiled, "No. Mateo has a right to know his whole family." The guests started to make their entrance. Relatives, family members, kin. The Valencias, who had previously turned her away, now arrived with gifts for her son. From the kitchen, Carolina summoned Carmen with a call. Aunt Eugenia inquires about the photos of Diego. The album, a cherished gem he had safeguarded for years, was now exchanged from one person to another. Could he really be that attractive? A cousin let out a weary sigh. "Just like little Mateo, I've added another." Carolina observed from her secluded spot when she sensed a hand resting on her shoulder. "How have you been?" Alejandro extended a glass of wine to him. "Feeling swamped. 5 years ago, I found myself isolated in a hospital. And now it seems you've got an abundance of family," he quipped. "Mother," Mateo dashed toward them. "Aunt Eugenia claims she possesses videos of Dad from his childhood." The footage captured Diego and Alejandro frolicking in that very garden. Two inseparable children, unaware of the fate that lay ahead of them. Carmen leaned closer to Carolina and murmured, "Look at them." Alejandro consistently shielded Diego. "Now he stands guard over his son," Carolina observed, as Alejandro assisted Mateo in extinguishing the candles. Following the cake, as the children engaged in their play, Carolina discovered Alejandro in Diego's study. "We once completed our assignments in this very spot," he remarked, gently caressing the weathered desk. "Are you longing for his presence?" "Every day." But now, he gazed out the window at Mateo playing with his cousins. The pain had transformed. "In what way is it different?" "It feels like he sought the right words, as though his absence had drawn us nearer to one another." Carolina walked over to the desk and pulled open a drawer. Within, a photograph captured the moment, Diego and Alejandro on their graduation day. "I stumbled upon this a few days ago," he remarked. "Check out the message on the back." Alejandro flipped the photo to its reverse side. "To my brother, cherish what is dear to me." Carolina whispered, "You accomplished it, surpassing all his expectations." It was quite straightforward. Alejandro drew her in tightly. "Your presence invites affection effortlessly." "Father." Mateo burst through the door. "Come witness my creation." As she observed their departure, Carolina glanced at the photo once more. "Thank you, Diego," he murmured, "for entrusting us to capable hands." The festivities outside persisted. After years apart, the Valencias finally came together as a whole family, imperfect, marked by their past, yet undeniably united. Amidst the chaos, a 5-year-old boy stepped in to mend the bridges that pride had shattered. For it is often true that the most genuine affection can be found in the tiniest of forms. Second chances arrive precisely when we are prepared to embrace them. The Italian restaurant where it all began was nearly deserted. Carolina glanced at her watch. 8:30 p.m. "Do you think Mateo will get along well with my mother?" he inquired for the third time. Alejandro smiled, urging calmness to wash over the moment. "Carmen is likely indulging him at this very moment. That is what concerns me. The identical table. The identical perspective. Yet, all had changed. Do you recall the very first moment our paths crossed in this place?" Alejandro inquired. "Unambiguous. You inquired about a wine that would leave a lasting impression on your date. And you suggested the most affordable option on the menu. It was clear that you were not familiar with wines at all." Carolina chuckled softly. "Diego teased you for weeks on end. And I continued to return, week after week, selecting affordable wines. Was it until Diego triumphed over you? Negative. Alejandro grasped her hand gently. It wasn't until Diego revealed to me the reality of true love. Carolina sensed a shift in the air around her. What brings us to this moment, Alejandro? This is the place where everything began. I noticed you here for the very first time. In this moment, I witnessed my cousin experience the beauty of falling in love. In this moment, I realized that love is free from constraints. He rose to his feet and, much to Carolina's astonishment, lowered himself to one knee. Hold on, she murmured. Negative. I have been waiting for far too long. He retrieved a petite box. Carolina Ruiz. I cherished you quietly when you were the waitress my cousin pursued. I harbored feelings for you in silence when you took on the role of his partner. I cherished you with a sense of remorse upon our reunion. And now, Alejandro, I love you without reservation. For you and Mateo. Not to take Diego's place, but to embody the man I have become because of you. He lifted the lid of the box. The ring exuded simplicity and elegance. Would you do me the honor of becoming my spouse? Carolina gazed at the ring, then turned her attention to Alejandro. His eyes, distinct from Diego's, gazed at her with an unwavering affection. Matthew commenced. Alejandro smiled, having already received his permission. Actually, it was his suggestion to come here. My 5-year-old son orchestrated this, with assistance from Carmen, Ana, and essentially the whole office. Carolina chuckled amidst her tears. So, what's the verdict? Alejandro appeared anxious for the first time. Would you grant me the privilege of officially beginning this family? Carolina cradled his face in her hands. We have always been family, he murmured, ever since that little boy dashed towards you, shouting, Dad. Is that an affirmative? Absolutely, yes. Applause broke the moment of the kiss. The waiters, those familiar faces from years past, rejoiced. The manager declared that the wine would be complimentary. The less expensive option. Alejandro made a witty remark. Carolina made the correction, the best. This time, you possess knowledge about wines. No, Alejandro pressed his lips to her hand, where the ring glimmered. This time, I have a deeper understanding of love. And thus, from the very beginning, a fresh creation emerged. Not a joyful conclusion, but an exciting fresh start. Not an alternative, but an extension. A tale of romance that started with budget-friendly wine and culminated in the finest champagne. For there are moments when destiny reveals its whimsical side. And genuine affection arrives twice, distinct yet equally profound. The San Francisco church was packed. The ceremony deviated from conventional norms. No one anticipated it would turn out this way. Mother? Mateo stepped into the room where Carolina was preparing herself. May I pose a question to you? Absolutely, my dear. Carolina allowed the makeup artist to complete the final touches. Do you think Dad Diego would feel pleased? The atmosphere was still. Carmen, delicately adjusting the veil, paused, holding her breath in anticipation. Approach me. Carolina stretched out her arms. Do you recall the letter? The one that Father Diego composed for Father Ale. Precisely. Your Father Diego wished for our happiness and for us to be a family. Is this the right moment? Just like this moment. Mateo retrieved an item from his pocket. Is it all right if I take this? It was an image of Diego, creased and weathered. Mateo clarified that he is with us. In my pocket, nestled near my heart, Carmen wept gently. Carolina embraced her son. It's flawless. At the altar, Alejandro stood with a flutter of anticipation in his chest. As the wedding march resonated through the air, it was not Carolina who made her entrance first. Mateo strode confidently, the rings in his grasp and a cherished photo tucked away in his pocket. Suddenly, Carolina emerged. He opted against the conventional white attire. Her dress shimmered in a hue reminiscent of the champagne they savored on their inaugural date. "You are beautiful," Alejandro murmured as he held her near. "I am whole," she responded. The priest initiated the ceremony, but paused when Mateo lifted his hand. "May I share a thought?" All faces lit up with joy. A 5-year-old crashing a wedding was quite an unusual occurrence. "Proceed, my champion," Alejandro urged. Mateo retrieved a wrinkled piece of paper. "Dear Dad Diego," he read aloud with clarity. "My grandmother, Carmen, assisted me in crafting this. I want you to understand that Mom is joyful, that Dad Ao looks after us just as you wished, and that we are a family, united as one." The church was filled with tears, as emotions ran high. "And I want you to understand," Mateo continued, "that I have 2 fathers, one in heaven who watches over me from above and one here who embraces me when I'm scared. My mother tells me that it makes me twice as fortunate." Alejandro knelt before Mateo. "You are the reason for our fortune, champion." The ceremony pressed on, yet it had transformed into something beyond a mere wedding. A healing moment for the family. It was a devotion that celebrated another. He was a young soul bridging 2 realms. As the priest announced them as husband and wife, Mateo was the first to break into applause. "Now we are a family," he exclaimed. Everyone chuckled, for a 5-year-old had grasped the true nature of love, boundless, unrestrained, with a heart that perpetually accommodates more. Amidst the lively reception, as the music filled the air and guests twirled on the dance floor, Carolina spotted Alejandro lost in thought, gazing at a childhood photo of himself and Diego. "What occupies your thoughts?" Upon fulfilling my promise, a smile spread across his face. "I nurtured them, I cherished them. And now, we are a family, the very one that Diego envisioned for us." As they twirled with Mateo in their midst, the past and present intertwined seamlessly, for often the conclusion of one tale marks the dawn of another. True and pure love endures, it evolves, grows, and enhances our very being. 3 years have passed. "Father, hurry." Mateo, now 8 years old, dashed along the beach that Diego cherished deeply. "The waves are sublime." Alejandro abandoned the umbrellas on the beach, half buried in the sand. "I'm on my way, champion." Carolina observed them from her seat, one hand resting on her prominent belly. 7 months with twins. Carmen remarked, sitting beside him, that he resembles Diego so much when he runs. "Yet his smile resembles Alejandro's," Carolina replied. 3 years had brought about significant changes. The organization was thriving. The family had found their way to healing. And affection had blossomed in unforeseen manners. "Mommy," Mateo dashed back here. "I discovered something intriguing." In his grasp, an aged bottle. "Check out the label," he exclaimed with enthusiasm. It was the wine that Carolina always suggested at the restaurant, the most affordable option on the menu. "Do you recall?" Alejandro settled onto the sand beside her. "Each nuance." Mateo carefully retrieved his most cherished possession, the aged photograph of Diego. Father directed his words at the photograph, a familiar ritual for him. "Your favorite wine has been discovered." "Actually," Alejandro clarified, "it was my preferred wine. I got it just to catch a glimpse of your mom." "Is that so?" Mateo chuckled. "Why was I not informed about that story?" "Some stories," Carolina took Alejandro's hand, "are sweeter when discovered in solitude." Carmen retrieved a camera. "Picture of the family." Mateo nestled comfortably between his parents. Diego held the photo tightly in his hands. "Hold on," he said. He set the photograph gently on the sand before them. "The entire family has gathered together now." The flash immortalized the instant. A contemporary family, shaped by the ebb and flow of love discovered and rediscovered. exploring the depths of suffering and the journey toward restoration. On the topic of new beginnings. The little ones are moving, Carolina whispered. Alejandro rested his hand gently on her belly. Diana and Daniela. What led Mateo to his decision? Mateo explained with pride, it's for the D of Diego. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm glow of orange and pink across the sky. Do you realize something? Mateo gazed at the horizon. I believe that bottle was sent to us by Dad Diego. What makes you say that, my dear? In an effort to evoke our origins, I felt it was important to highlight that love has the capacity to return, reminding us to cherish its presence anew. Carolina and Alejandro exchanged glances, taken aback by the depth of their son's insight. And sometimes, Carmen added, the most profound love emerges from the deepest sorrow. The family gathered on the sand, united as the waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. Not flawless, but finished. Not without marks, but fortified by them. And in a distant moment, Diego wore a smile. As his final desire had come to fruition. His family was whole. His affection had flourished into something far beyond his own being. And his son, the young Mateo, had grasped the most vital lesson. True love knows no boundaries. He is oblivious to the passage of time. And forever, discovers its path back home.